Hey, toy fans and toy professionals and people stalking me on the internet. I'm Scott ToyGuru Neitlich, and we're going to be doing a video today on the DC Superheroes Man-Bat figure from Mattel. And I say DC Superheroes and not DC Universe Classics because this was a toy that predated DC Universe Classics before the Master Agreement and was kind of one of the very last, if not the last, figure in the DC Superheroes line that was released at San Diego Comic-Con in a deluxe Lights and Sounds amazing package. And so that makes this video kind of a, I guess you could say, a fill-in-the-gap episode. It's not part of DC Universe Classics, but it predated Wave 1, and I've been getting a lot of questions about this one, and since it's essentially one of the very first DC toys I worked on, even though it was before Classics, felt like it deserved a video, especially because it gets a lot of questions. Like, why the white Man-Bat instead of the brown Man-Bat? And there is precedent for white Man-Bat, obviously, in the comics, and there is precedent for the brown Man-Bat in the comics. That's probably the question we get the most about this item, why San Diego Comic-Con had the white version and not the brown one, which is arguably, can't speak today. Boy, I'm going to have to change my batteries. Let's just say most people tend to prefer the brown one versus the white one, even though the white one is, also used in some of the animated series, beyond just the comic books, makes numerous appearances in this deco scheme. And that's actually kind of what it comes down to, is deco scheme. Man-Bat is a great figure for toy companies because you can use the same tool that you've invested in to do two different toys. You can do a white version and you can do a brown version and basically double dip for your tooling dollars. Because Man-Bat's pretty much a 100% tooled figure. He doesn't really share parts with anyone else. So any toy company that's going to tool up a Man-Bat, if you can get two decos out of it, that's basically doubling your investment in this tool. I mean, heck, I've seen red versions of Man-Bat done. We did a clear version for this toy we're talking about. So, yeah, he's always 100% tool. So anytime you can maximize the number of decos that, shall we say, are acceptable. I mean, you're not going to do like a rainbow colored Man-Bat or, something like a green Man-Bat maybe. I mean, who knows? Maybe Spin Master will do a green Man-Bat after this video. But brown and white tend to be the main colors that, I guess, shall we say, he comes in. And, another good example of this is Doomsday in, again, that DC Superheroes line, which was much more aimed at kids and was really, again, trying to maximize the tooling investment. So you saw Doomsday repainted in bright red, which was, I guess, kind of lava reflection based on the Justice League Unlimited episode, but they did the red on the sort of the comic book version, and then went and did the red on the JLU version, which is the one here. So again, this is just another example of double dipping when you invest between $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 in a tool, depending on the size. You're going to want to try to make as much as you can from it. All right. Back to Man-Bat. So that just was a quick overview of why toys come in multiple colors, especially collector toys. And since this was definitely a collector toy released at Comic-Con, I think a lot of people expected him to come in brown, which is sort of more the collector-friendly color, versus doing him in white. And a lot of this is because Man-Bat was part of the DC Superheroes line and not part of the DC Universe Classics line. So he was predated the Master toy license that allowed Mattel access at more characters. And if memory recalls, the brown one was actually shown either on a cross-sell or at like a New York Toy Fair event. Honestly, I apologize, I don't know the exact detail. I don't remember everything, but fans definitely saw it. It might have been on a cross-sell. I looked to try to see if I could find the cross-sell. This was one of the only ones I could find online, but a cross-sell gives toys that are also in the line and you're supposed to look for. So either way, people knew that Man-Bat was kind of sculpted and out there, but didn't ship. And so a lot of this has to do with, well, one, that DC Superheroes was kind of a sofa bed line. It wasn't quite for collectors. It wasn't quite for kids. It was kind of that in-between thing, which is why it evolved correctly into DC Universe Classics, which was for collectors. But if we were doing a collector figure in DC Superheroes at Comic-Con, well, why was he not in the brown deco for collectors? Well, that has to do with a few factors, and really the biggest is how Mattel treated Comic-Con. Mattel had a class of MBA interns, and the ones that were assigned to the Action Play group, their assignment for the summer was to run Comic-Con. Honestly, it was a show that, back in 2000 through 2005, that kind of era when Mattel was first attending, it wasn't a priority for the company, and it was just sort of given to the interns as their summer project. And you were basically lucky if you got an intern who was a comic book fan. It was more likely, since the interns came from like UCLA and USC, from their business school, they were just interested in Mattel because it was a giant, Fortune 500 company, not because they were making specifically Batman action figures. And then along comes me, someone who actually is into Batman action figures, who's working for Mattel. So yeah, I've often kind of said I was like the hair club for men, where I was a client or a customer and working on the line. I was basically collecting lines I was working on, which definitely made me a very rare animal around Mattel. Most people at Mattel were basically just there for the company. And because I was so passionate as an action figure collector, to say I took on more work than I should have is an understatement. I was basically working because I was so passionate about action figure collecting as a collector myself that I started taking on all these projects like, MattyCollector.com, for example. And I took on completely revamping the company's Comic-Con presence, in addition to my regular day-to-day job, because that was just something I was passionate about. And I'm not putting myself on a pillar here, but I was basically doing a lot more work than your typical Mattel employee, simply because I loved what I was doing. I think some of the proof in the pudding is looking at what Mattel did from a collector standpoint after I left Mattel, when Matty Collector shut down, and seeing the kind of things that they were doing post me, and then reflecting back on the kind of product that came out while I was there. That's kind of the difference right there, but it's because I was sort of doing the 3 different jobs: Comic-Con, Matty Collector, and brand managing DC. All right, so let's get back to Comic-Con exclusives. As I said, pretty much the interns for the summer were running Comic-Con, which meant if you wanted to get more work into a Comic-Con exclusive, it was pretty much passed over to the packaging group to plus up an existing figure, which was an easier route than getting design to do something. Now, sometimes you did get some really great figures for Comic-Con. I'm not saying Mattel didn't, but it wasn't really a priority the way it is, today, where items are developed for Comic-Con a year in advance. So Man-Bat kind of fell into this, where they had this sculpt that was unreleased in the main line, and Frank Varela, who is in packaging, who's a very, very passionate packaging designer, essentially took on the task, again, kind of like what I was doing running Matty. He went above and beyond his regular duties and said, I'll design the Comic-Con exclusive. And he really did it from a packaging standpoint, which is why Man-Bat was so kind of packaging driven, with, die cuts in the box and all of the Wayne tech, on the outer shipper, and the lights and sounds and the fold-out wings. This was a packaging-driven exclusive, because that, the marketing interns were like, I don't know how to do a Comic-Con exclusive. We'll just get packaging to do it. Versus now, it tends to be a marketing-driven item, and it's designed, a year in advance for Comic-Con, as opposed to being a last-minute scramble, which is kind of what Man-Bat was. It was a tool that existed that they could put into a fancy box. And that is why they went with the white version, because the box that Frank designed was very dark, and the brown version was not showing up against the very dark box. And it's also why a clear version was created, because with the lights and sounds, it would light up the clear figure. It's honestly as simple as that. It was basically using clear and using white versions because they looked the best in Frank's package. That's why the brown was not used. Brown was just not showing up. And doing white and doing clear really popped against this amazing package that Frank had designed. Again, kind of almost in his spare time. Frank really went all out he and I were the two kind of examples of the rare people that were collectors and employees of Mattel, and you kind of saw that in the work we did. We tended to take on way more work than we should have, but as the flip side of that is we got to have amazing experiences like designing Comic-Con items and running amazing toy lines. And, as Winston Churchill says, never let a good crisis go to waste. And, of course, all the people saying, well, why'd you do the white version? We really want the brown one. Well, that really pretty much only meant that we had an excuse to do the brown one without it seeming like a cheap repaint and having him be a legitimate figure in a wave. So, because normally we wouldn't just do a repaint in a wave, but because it became so demanded, because we hadn't done the white one, it was the fans sort of gave us the leverage we needed in order to just do a straight repaint in a wave, as a wave figure, which normally we wouldn't do that. Normally, the waves are unique. And that was the journey, and the journey kept going because we now had access to the entire DC library thanks to the master license, and we were off to bigger and better things with DC superheroes behind and DC Universe classics in front of us. If you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe. My channel's here, and we're going to keep pumping these out. I hope you've enjoyed them. Thanks.